Worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for their daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glass.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Berkeley Debate Colloquium Season Opener Intensive. My name is Jessica Cheng, one of the co-founders of BDC, and today we're going to be talking about negative fiat. So, should the negative get fiat, or is it just a meme that's been relegated to the annals of history? Let's talk about it. So, fiat, if we remember from before, is an act of imagination that allows us to bypass the feasibility or the probability of something being enacted so that we can debate about the desirability of the advocacy or plan in the first place. So thus, from the perspective of the negative, fiat distinguishes a counterplan which functions as a counter-advocacy to that of the plan from the disadvantage, which is a defense of the status quo. And negative fiat is used to distinguish or demonstrate an opportunity cost to the plan itself. But it seems like the negative isn't forced to defend the resolution, so why should they get to fiat an arbitrary worldview? Well, there's a couple of reasons why this is allowed, and these are known as the justifications for negative fiat. First is that it needs to check against affirmative parametricization. Recall that the affirmative has the burden to parametricize the resolution, which means that they are able to define the relevant terms, the action, the actor, the time frame, and the resolution in general. Because the affirmative can check or change the scope of the resolution and the type of offense they defend, giving the negative some ability to fiat an advocacy is able to check back against this amount of affirmative flex. Additionally, oftentimes the affirmative will be able to fiat resolutional topical actions that don't really make sense in the context of the current political climate. This seems to imply that the affirmative also gets to fiat a mindset shift. For example, consider that the Republicans or the GOP in today's Congress would probably never fiat some kind of expansive carbon tax. However, it's assumed that the affirmative gets to fiat not only that a carbon tax or other similar leftist legislation might actually pass, but that members of the GOP would actually vote in favor of it. So if the affirmative can fiat some kind of unrealistic mindset shift, then negative fiat makes this ability reciprocal. Additionally, given that our model for debate assumes this type of testing of various arguments, and that being the number one portable skill that we get out of technical debate, negative fiat allows the negative to test the viability or the desirability of the affirmative plan or advocacy from a multiplicity of angles. Having multiple counter-advocacies, critique alternatives, counterplans, etc. that are testing the desirability of the AF ensures that we get more education and we get more fairness in the round. Now that we've heard a few justifications in favor of negative fiat, let's hear a couple of justifications against negative fiat. First is that the AF is upheld to the resolution, which means that it's their burden to defend it. So fiat gives the negative an unreciprocal amount of potential advocacies, including but not limited to conditional counterplans, conditional K alternatives, alongside a defense of the status quo. Additionally, any type of counterplan that would be functionally unrealistic means that an unrealistic opportunity cost is not really that good of a test against the desirability of the plan in the first place. And finally, the whole idea that we need a fiated counter-advocacy to prove the desirability of the AF or to prove an opportunity cost is false. We can show an opportunity cost to the AF via defense of the status quo that doesn't require negative fiat. Additionally, we saw all these justifications against negative fiat in the first place. However, there are a few arguments via the AF that can check against negative fiat, and one of those are intrinsic perms. A traditional permutation is inclusive of all of the affirmative advocacy as well as all or part of the negative advocacy. For example, permutation, do the AF and do the alt, or do the AF and do the counterplan, or permutation, do the AF and all non-competitive parts of the counterplan or alternative. This is what we understand as a traditional perm, because it includes all of the AF as well as all or some portion of the negative advocacy. However, the difference between a traditional permutation and an intrinsic permutation is that an intrinsic perm includes all of the AF as well as all or some part of the negative advocacy and some additional action that is not within the scope of the AF or the neg advocacy. So now that we've introduced an intrinsic perm, you might think that sounds a little bit unfair. However, compare this against negative fiat in the first place. If the neg is given some ability to fiat an arbitrary, unrealistic worldview and pass that off as an opportunity cost to the affirmative, then why can't the AF disprove that opportunity cost with some additional action not included within the scope of either advocacy? You might listen to that description of an intrinsic permutation and think of this as your go-to strat against negative fiat. However, keep in mind that there are some hidden implications of intrinsic permutations that you might not be thinking of. For example, if the res is only a good idea, if we do also this other thing that's outside the scope of either advocacy, how is that different from also saying that the res is a bad idea because it prevents us from doing that additional thing outside of the scope of both advocacies? It seems as though it's saying that the res is an opportunity cost to separate action. This is just one of the questions that might be raised about the difference between negative fiat and other methods to check against it. Whether the neg gets fiat and access to fiated advocacies is an ongoing debate that you'll have in the round, but at least be aware of this type of debate and the various attitudes and the arguments that people use in support or against it. Thank you for joining me in another episode with the Berkeley Debate Colloquium Season Opener Intensive, and I will see you next time.
Worn out faces, bright and early for their daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses, no expression, no expression. Hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow.